Hey, it's Juck, and welcome into part 2 of my interview with legendary Buckeye and Ohio State All-American. A slew of other titles can come after that, but I'll wait till later. Kirk Barton. Kirk was kind enough to give us a full hour of his time, and he did not disappoint. In part 1, we went over quite a few things. I'm going to hit on a couple of those, and then we're going to roll into episode 2. We talked about the 2005 Fiesta Bowl against Notre Dame. That was one of Kirk's favorite games he ever played in. Kirk loves Brady Quinn. He thinks he should have been a Buckeye. I think my favorite moment of that first episode was this quote from Kirk. Our defense was going to have to do some replenishing after that season. I know people always like to say we don't rebuild, we reload. Those are just words. When you lose an A.J. Hawk, a Bobby Carpenter, a Dante Whitner, you can't just reload from that. This is a quote that really resonates with me because I find myself sometimes in the position that I've heard a lot of people going into this season saying they wanted Mech to go pro. They thought that Emeka was, holding back some of the younger guys that were more talented. And I think listening to that perspective from Kirk is something that should be heard every now and again, because I do it too. I get ahead of myself with a prospect and want, a guy who maybe not Emeka. I think Emeka's great, but maybe somebody else to, maybe move along, go to the NFL, because I think that the next guy up is going to be better when that guy's got no experience, and I rarely take into account what the team chemistry is with that guy. You take a guy like Emeka, a wonderful leader, everybody looks up to him, a calming influence. That would have been a huge loss. So, it really resonated with me when Kirk said that one. I really liked hearing that. We also discussed the Texas rematch down in Austin when the Bucs went down after losing at home the year before, and they went down to Texas and beat the defending champions. They were on a 21-game winning streak. After that game, Kirk ran to the sliver of Ohio State fans who had made the trip and gave them the horns down, and that little snippet was in an article that was, I think, in the AP, because it went all over the country. If you search it today, that game, that's the first thing that will come up, is Kirk doing that. We definitely talked about the game of the century and Bo's death, the lead up to that. We all knew that game was coming. It was going to be a 1-versus-2 matchup. Then, of course, the Buckeyes win 42-39, and Michigan is sitting there having one loss to the number 1 team in the country. Then you got Florida with one loss to number 11 Auburn. Who's going to make it to the national championship? I don't know how you guys felt, but I wanted to play Florida, and I thought that the Bucs were going to, when Florida got chosen to play in that game, absolutely roll them. And that's not what happened. Obviously, we all know that. We talked a little bit about that game, the 2006 national championship game. Not a ton, but I got to tell you, it was a game that I just put out of my mind as fast as possible. And I didn't even look at the box score of that game and never wanted to see it until the night before I had Kirk on. I actually decided to force myself to look at it. Oh, man, it was worse than I thought. But our guy Brian Hartline did lead the team in receiving with 1 catch for 13 yards. It was so bad. It was so bad. But, sometimes these things just happen. Everything just goes wrong, and everything just went wrong. And Teddy breaking his leg is just like, that was the precursor right there. It was just an omen. But it was a very consequential game, and Kirk and I discussed that as well. Because that game was the game that really turned the tide of the SEC dominance. Because the following year, and we discussed the 2007 national championship game against LSU, which was a very competitive game, but the final score was a little lopsided because of 5 personal fouls by the Buckeyes, and it just kind of got out of hand on the scoreboard. So if you looked at those 2 scores back to back, it looked like 2 different SEC teams beat the best that the Big Ten had to offer in Ohio State in consecutive national championships and beat them really bad. And that just started that narrative rolling, and we've seen it roll all the way until I think it's just now finally starting to lose steam. So that game, that 2006 championship game against Florida, was extremely, extremely consequential. Kirk reminded us that 2004, Auburn went undefeated. And that season, USC and Oklahoma played in the national championship. Auburn sat at home. I had forgotten that. And finally, Kirk discussed Urban Meyer. He was his very first guy to offer him. When Kirk was in high school at Perry and Massillon, Kirk was a tight end. Urban Meyer was at Bowling Green. And he came and offered Kirk, and he was the first guy to offer him. And then after he did, there was a floodgate of offers. Kirk kind of took us through that process of being a young recruit and getting that first offer and how much that means to you. And I think it's pretty incredible and so cool that Kirk kind of went full circle with Urban Meyer from being the first guy to offer him to eventually coaching under him. This is a guy who has had an experience at Ohio State that is, it's almost unparalleled when you think of he started 4 years, first guy to ever start and win 4 games against Michigan, played under Jim Tressel, then he coached under Jim Tressel, then he coached for the Luke Fickell team that was one of the worst teams we've ever seen in Ohio State, of our lives, right? I don't even know how bad. I'd have to go back and look to find a comparable season. Then he coached under Urban Meyer when Urban came and took the team over. And now he runs the most successful show in all of Buckeye world. So the journey he's been on with Ohio State has been one that I don't know if you can match it with anybody else's story. There's a whole lot of stuff there. And I didn't even get into his personal accolades. The guy was an All-American, first team coaches All-American. So pretty incredible. And he sat down with me, little Juck on Bucks, as we head into, we're just finishing our second month on the show. That was pretty cool. So thank you, Kirk. Guys, let's get into part number 2 because I'm just rambling here. I'm really excited. This was awesome. And part number 2 is even better than part 1. So enjoy.
Oh, it was interesting because obviously, the SEC didn't exist back then. Like the SEC was completely irrelevant leading up to that 06 championship game. You got to remember, and this isn't me being Big Ten nostalgia guy, but like in 04, the Auburn Tigers went undefeated in the SEC, which again, nobody cared about the SEC. And they got left out of the national championship game. And that was the year that USC played Oklahoma and beat them like 55 to 10. It was just a bludgeoning. And so that's how little people thought of the SEC back then. So, the SEC obviously, wasn't a conference that was as highly regarded as the Big Ten and the Big 12 and the Pac-10 and whatever. So, and again, that might be just my thoughts, and maybe nationally it was different, but they weren't the juggernaut that they became after the 06 game. So I thought, and I knew Urban for a long time. Urban was the first guy to offer me a scholarship. I was excited to play against him. I saw what he was doing at Florida. I loved his offense. But yeah, I got a really good show of his offense that night. It was amazing to watch.
So that was actually my next question is, I didn't know that you knew Urban. So did he offer you when he was at Bowling Green or was he at Utah?
He was at Bowling Green. It was my first offer, 2001. He was literally the first coach to offer me a scholarship. He came and watched me work out at Perry High School with Keith Wakefield. And our workouts were insane. They were during the school hours. It was like a gym class, except we were in this little weight room and we were just impossibly efficient. Like we would get a crazy good workout in 45 minutes. We never stopped moving. And Urban Meyer told my head coach, Keith Wakefield, he's never seen anything like what we did ever. And he's been all over the country, and he's been at a million high schools when he's recruiting at Notre Dame and Colorado State, and he's never seen anything like what we did. Because our weight room was our edge at Perry High School, and it was because our head coach, Keith Wakefield, was the best. He's the best strength coach I've ever seen. He's better than Mickey Marotti, and we got after it hardcore, and that was our edge. But I just think that Urban, like I didn't know him that well because he wasn't at Bowling Green he was there for about another few months, and then he took off for Utah. But I really liked him. Like I actually loved him because he was the first. The first guy to pull the trigger and offer you a scholarship is the guy you always remember. You don't remember your second, third, eighth, 10th, but you remember the first guy that jumps in the boat because coaches are generally softies and they're scared and they're worried about people's opinions. So if a kid doesn't have an offer from a D1 school, it's really hard to get that first one. But all of a sudden,
Right.
when one guy offers you, when Bowling Green offered, literally within a month, I had every school in the MAC. And then I was starting to get the lower tier Big Ten teams like Purdue and those types. But it takes that first guy taking the chance on you for everybody to jump in the boat. And Urban was that guy. So I love Urban Meyer. And I love Jim Tressel too. But Urban, obviously he didn't have as much to lose at BG versus Truss at OSU. But Urban was my guy, and I was excited about that offer, and I still remember it like it was yesterday.
That's really cool. I did not know that. So a lot's been made about Troy and In-N-Out Burger and the 50 days between that game of the century and the Florida National Championship game. Do you put anything into that? Or, I mean, it was just a game that they were better on the defensive line, and it just kind of got away from you early after Teddy broke his leg. I don't know. I just kind of chalked it up.
I think that the funny thing about the In-N-Out Burger thing, because I get that all the time, the In-N-Out Burger thing, because I'm like, do you guys not realize like all we ate back then, all we ate was McDonald's, and all we ate, because we were poor. Like we didn't have like a cafeteria that made us food. And so like there's a McDonald's that's right next to the Woody Hayes. I think it's still there. Like if you wanted to like go get autographs from players, like you could go stand in that drive-through line and there'd be like 50 players coming through that line, an hour before meetings. I mean, it was, and then there was a Subway in that same, I don't know if that, I don't think that plaza's still there, but like if you went to those places and Raising Cane's, like those three places that's where 99% of our calories came from on a daily basis. So like eating In-N-Out Burger, like, when you're college athletes and you're dirt poor, your diet is going to be trash. You're going to be eating McDonald's and fast food. And so like that was like the funniest thing ever. It's like, don't you guys realize like what we eat at home? Like we're not eating like kale and vegetables and because we're poor. Like we can't afford it. Like I mean, dude, like we're a lot of stipend. Like I mean, you can't go out, like I can't go out and eat like I do now that I actually, I'm employed and I have an MBA and I have, a profession. Like now I can eat, whatever I want, whenever I want. But back then I couldn't eat anywhere near as good as I do now. But, it was just one of those interesting deals because we went out there like 2 weeks early, which is way too long. And they never did that. I don't think they ever did that again. And so we're out at these two different hotels for 2 weeks. And again, Florida beat us fair and square. I do not make excuses. Yeah. They dominated us that night. And again, but we went out there on the 26th. We didn't play till like the 7th, I think, or 8th or whatever. And so that was way too long. Like I think we should have stayed at the Woody Hayes for an extra week make everybody fly back after Christmas. And again, it's easy to say this now because I think that something that happened is I think a lot of people at Ohio State, coaches, players, administrators, they fell into this pattern where it's like, okay, we're going to go stay at the Fairmount Princess, which is where we stayed for the Miami Hurricanes game and the Kansas State game and the Notre Dame game, all 3 wins. Oh, we're the number 1 seed. Oh, well, we're going to wear the white jerseys. Why? Because what did we wear against Miami? What did we wear against Kansas State? What did we wear against Notre Dame? The white jerseys in the Fiesta Bowl. That was like the Columbus West is what they used to call it, or Ohio State West. And like we fell into this trap where it was like, well, we got to stick to superstition and do the same stuff, and the formulas worked. And again, in the moment, that sounds right. But the fact is, like, if I could go back in time, like, I don't think that there's some things that needed to be fixed dramatically. And plus, I think that Michigan, our offense was putrid that night, and Michigan exposed some parts of our defense that Urban Meyer attacked, and he talks about that in his book where there were some DBs that he wanted to exploit, and he literally would there were a couple of our DBs that he didn't think were very good, and he literally had practice jerseys made with their numbers, and he made all of his wide receivers. He taped the jersey on the ground when they're walking out to practice, and he made all the wide receivers like wipe their cleats with that cornerback's jersey number. So like Urban was a genius, and he would make up quotes about stuff we said and put it in the locker room. Kirk Barton said that the defensive ends were slow and too small and blah. Like he literally he said that like I'd make some stuff up and put it up on the walls, and then the players would read it, and it was like he would just kind of artificially make everyone angry. And again, that's why he's a genius. You got to remember he's got a psych degree. He's a psychology major, and he puts that thing to use. They should name the college, whatever the psych building is for the Cincinnati Bearcats, they should name it after him because he was a genius when it came to motivating teams. And it's always easier to be the underdog in those games. We got exposed, and we didn't play. We picked a bad time to play the worst game of our careers. Obviously, you're on the biggest stage, and we had a bunch of personal fouls. We gave them short fields all night. We get stopped on a 4th and 1 because we don't cut off a backside defensive end, which is like the easiest block in football. So I mean, like we were an absolute clown car that night. And again, I feel bad because people spent fortunes to get out there, and that's what I tell guys. I'm like, look, if you buy tickets to these games, man, there ain't no guarantee we're going to win now. So
that's
just
what's always so tough.
Enjoy the experience because I'm telling you, man, there's sometimes you go and spend $20,000 and all of a sudden like, well, that was a waste of money. I'm like, well, watch it on TV or just go, whatever. But I hate saying that, but it's like, I tell people it's like just because you're going to these games doesn't mean we're going to win now. You gotta enjoy the experience. It's like going to a prize fight or a UFC fight. Like just because you're going to see Conor McGregor doesn't mean he's not going to get knocked out by or choked out by Nate Diaz or Khabib or whoever. That's just part of live sports.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm with you. It was one of the most consequential games of the 2000s because of what it did in changing the narrative of the SEC and the SEC dominance. And it seems like it's not been until right about now that's finally starting to change a little bit because they just had a really down year. Their depth is not anywhere near what it used to be. The top end talent's still there. But that didn't stop the Buckeyes from going into the 2007 season and getting their way up to the number 1 ranking. And 2007 was the craziest college football season that any of us can ever remember. It was just absolutely bonkers with the upsets. You had the number 1 and number 2 team lost in the same week 3 times. You guys ended up losing to, in week 11, Ron Zook, Juice Williams in Illinois at home. And it was just devastating. It seemed like the season was over. And it looked like the national championship was gone. And then some more upsets happen. You end up making it back and playing a 2-loss LSU team. But I want to know, after the Florida defensive line did so well against you the year prior, and you were going against LSU, led by Glenn Dorsey and that crazy defensive line, how are you feeling as an offensive lineman, the leader of that group, going against those guys?
Well, I mean, like, the funny thing about the Florida game, I actually might do a video where I break down all the sacks from that game. Because I gave up 1 sack that game. And really, like, it wasn't because I just flat could beat. Like, Troy kind of scrambled. Troy apologized to me after I gave up the sack because he kind of scrambled out of the pocket. And I tell the quarterbacks, look, if you leave the pocket, you're on your own, dude. Like that ain't counting against me because if you're not where I think you're going to be, then I can't pass protect for you. But we played better guys than the Florida guys. Like Lamar Woodley was much better. Tom Bahali was much better. Again, it's not just my opinion. Go look at their NFL careers. Like Tom Bahali is a multiple-time Pro Bowler. I never gave up a sack against him. Lamar Woodley never gave up a sack against him. So Lamar didn't have a sack against Booney either in 06. So. I think that, we had confidence because, again, in 07, like, the DNs I saw in practice were way better than Tyson Jackson and Glenn Dorsey. Like, Cam Hayward and Vernon Golson. Tyson went 3rd overall, but he was a bigger guy. He was slow. He was a complete bust in the NFL. It was amazing. He went 3rd overall in the draft, and he was terrible. And, again, that's why I think some of these GMs, I mean, they should ask me what I think of players because I could nail it, and I'd be like, how could you take a guy that runs a 5.2 40 3rd overall as a defensive end? Because he can't turn the corner on any good offensive tackle in the league. And Dorsey was good. Dorsey had a lot of highlights. The SEC's offensive lines were atrocious back then. We used to watch like Auburn and Mississippi State, and they looked like high schoolers because they were so bad. But that being said, we had, like I had confidence that we could block them. Now I knew it would be tough, and again, like that was a line that if you just look at the semantics, I was the only guy that got drafted on that entire offensive line. So we had 4 guys that were undrafted guys and me, and Todd Beckman didn't get drafted, who's our quarterback, and they had the guy that, set the record for the Packers, threw for 500 yards, the mock kid. Jacob Hester had a little bit of a career in the NFL. So, I mean, they probably were more talented than us as a whole, but we were closer. And, like, we fought that game. But, again, I tell guys all the time, the biggest problem with playing at Ohio State is 99.9% of the games you play in, you just have way better players. So you could roll the helmets out there and go 11-1 pretty easily at Ohio State. But in that one, which usually the last few years has been Michigan, you gotta play good, clean ball, and you can't make mistakes. You can't turn the ball over. You can't throw like Kyle McCord can't throw basically a pick six to start the game off. Like you do that against good teams, you're gonna lose. And we found that against Georgia when our special teams were an absolute clown car. It cost us the game. We miss a field goal, we blow a fake punt. Against that LSU team, they were good. But Robo dropped a touchdown that he normally would never drop. We had 5 personal fouls. We had a false start on the 3-yard line. So, when you do a bunch of stuff where you look like you've never practiced and you look like idiots, like you don't deserve to win those games. And again, and I'm not blaming Robo. Like Brian Robisky is one of the greatest human beings I've ever met in my life. I love Robo, and I'm sure that catch haunts him because Todd Beckman dropped that right in the basket. It went right through his arms, and Robo makes that catch 100 out of 100 times. So it was just one of those weird things. But in the moment, you got to convert on those. We got down to the 3-yard line, and we were mauling up front, and then we false started, and then we had a field goal get blocked. So again, like you just look like an absolute joke when you get a field goal blocked, when you have the ball on the 3-yard line and you don't convert and get points, and again, when you get a field goal blocked, like it gives them all the momentum. They hold you out of the end zone. You get no points on the board. So, at the end of the first quarter, we were up 10-0, but then we started making mistakes and, if you have 5 personal fouls, those were 15 yards and an automatic first down each time. So, like I said, when we were off the punter on 4th and 22, we were down 14 points and, we're about to get the ball back. So if we score, we cut it to a 7-point game, and we had all the momentum at that point. So again, you can't play stupid football versus equal talent. And that's what I always tell people. Like, look, a lot of times if it's all equal, the team that makes the fewest mistakes wins, and that's turnovers, that's dumb penalties. And it's also just, converting in the red zone, special teams. It's all the little stuff that isn't quite as sexy and it's kind of nuanced, but that's what wins games in equal talent games. And again, Ohio State is so talented now that it's usually like 1 or 2 teams in the entire country can match them in talent. But when you see those guys like Georgia or Michigan, then Michigan last year, not Michigan this year, then you better play a clean game, or else it could it'll give you heartache for basically ever.
So that 2007 season is something I point to when I'm arguing with someone about this 14-team playoff, which I'm very much against. We're never going to have another season like that again. I liked it at about 8 teams. I thought that would have been just fine. I'd have been accepting of it. I just hate the fact, Kirk, that the Buckeyes have 3 big games next year. They can probably lose all 3 and still be in the playoffs. I find that boring. I think that the regular season is going to die a slow death eventually, and I hate it. Talk me off a cliff, buddy.
Well, I think, I'll go the opposite way. I think, I love NFL football. Like Sundays are kind of my rest days. I lay there like a big slug. I get Sunday ticket. I've got TV set up. I've got multiple games on. I play fantasy football. I love fantasy football. So like, I love watching NFL football. Now, is every game as important as college, especially back when I played, where if you lost one game, you're out of the hunt? No. But I still watch every week, and I still love it every week. And, I think that the ability for teams, the thing I like about the new format is it doesn't penalize you if you play a real schedule. Because what's going to happen, and we've been projecting this on BuckeyesScoop.com, is that we're going to have, an NFL model where it's going to be AFC, NFC, which is going to be the SEC and the Big Ten. There's going to be 2 24-team conferences, and that's going to be it. And so I'm going to love that because you're going to have nothing but good on good. You're not going to have Akron anymore. You're not going to have Western Kentucky. You're not going to have Youngstown State. It's going to be good on good every week. And again, for me, I love that. Like, I love seeing great football. I love seeing, that's why I love the NFL, is because even the worst team in the NFL, the Carolina Panthers, can still beat a moderate to good team. You see some of these games like the Vegas Raiders, who are picking, in the top half of the first round, like they beat the Chiefs last year on like Christmas. So I mean, like in college, the gap is so wide that you don't see that. Like Akron has no chance to beat Ohio State, like literally none. So like I like that you're gonna get rid of some of those games, and honestly I like the 14 team playoff because I think you'll see less opt outs, you'll see more exciting. I mean, everyone's gonna watch every one of those games because when those games are on, there's not going to be any concurrent games. They're all going to be on one at a time, different time slots, and I think it's going to be great for football because I love watching really good football, really competitive games, and I think that's what we're going to get.
Hey, I'm keeping an open mind, and I can't wait for it, and I'm positive that playoff is going to be unbelievably exciting. My concern is just the regular season, but hey, we'll see how it goes. There's nothing I can do about it anyway. But I really think that since Nick Saban's retirement, I think a lot of people thought, in the recent years that 5 stars were spreading out, talent was spreading out, and when Saban retired, there would be kind of a power spreading out from that amongst a couple of schools. And I think that it has pretty much exclusively been Ryan Day and Ohio State's program pulling right up into the spot Alabama's vacating. And I think that the program is set up right now for sustained success at the highest level. And as soon as Ryan Day kicks in the door, I think that he's got the program set up like a machine that can stay there. And I'm really excited for it. What's your take on the state of Ryan Day's program right now?
Well, I like where he's at with his staff. I think he's got to get DeMarco Murray as a running backs coach. I think that when you have 2 guys at the top of each room, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, you all of a sudden, you got 2 guys, Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles, that Chip gave him a 3-year contract, a 3-year commitment. I don't know if he'll stay there that long, but I think that he's going to enjoy coaching offense and making good money and coaching great players and not having all the stress to do all of the ancillary stuff that comes with being a head coach. And Jim Knowles is an older guy, really good effort guy, really good schematically, really studies hard, works hard. And the good thing is like he's not like a real desirable head coaching candidate, so I think that he could be here for a longer term than like a Jeff Hafley who was here for 1 year. So I think that having stability at the coordinators is important because I think Chip Kelly's at the point in life where if he gets some NFL OC job or some really compelling college job, I can see him taking it. But otherwise, like I think he's at Ohio State for a decent amount of time, which is going to be good for the cohesion of the staff. Obviously, you've got young guys that are going to become really hot commodities in the coaching community with Hartline and Laurinaitis and even DeMarco Murray if it gets formalized and they announce him as a running backs coach. So I think that, but having those guys at the top, it really strengthens everything because you have basically your 2 leaders of each side of the ball and you have Mickey Marotti. So you've got a lot of stability there, which I think is really good for the longevity of the program. The Foundation's done a great job with NIL. They were humongous with getting Caleb Downs. So I think that, NIL is very important. I love NIL. I think it's great. I think that the kids should make money. I think that they should, honestly, the funniest thing about these kids is none of them are good salespeople because none of them, they're all scared to talk to people. I'm like, guys, like if I was in your shoes, I would have been kicking every door in the universe down because, people like to talk to these guys, but these guys they want, it's like, they're not hunters. They're like, they're not even gatherers. They're just like lay around and hope someone brings me something to eat. And that's kind of what society is now. But like, if you're a hunter, like I am, I'm loving life. Cause I mean, these guys there's a lot of opportunity out there if you're hungry and aggressive. But I love where we're at. I love the city of Columbus. It's growing like crazy, with Intel coming in. So everything's kind of perking up. Like that's what I like. And we've got a nice pipeline with South Florida Express, obviously JJ Smith, the latest, and we got a couple more guys coming, Jamie French. So we got a lot of juice in South Florida, which is good because there's a lot of talent down there. And I think that Nick Saban retiring, Harbaugh leaving, it really bodes well for Ryan Day just from a recruiting aspect because Michigan is going to have to rebuild. Sherrod Moore is a D-list celebrity. He's not an A-lister like Harbaugh was. Yeah. And Nick Saban obviously was like the Mick Jagger of college football, and he's gone. Kalen DeBoer, I think, is a great coach, but he's got to get his defense tuned up because his defense was atrocious last year. And I think in the SEC, if you can't play defense, you're not going to be long for that league, even though they're just giving an 8-year deal. So it'll be interesting to see how those guys do in recruiting because like losing Nick Saban, again, it's like replacing Mick Jagger on the Rolling Stones. Like it ain't going to be the same, and you're not going to have the the same thing. And I think Alabama's going to regress back to where they'd been prior to Nick Saban, which was
I've been saying that for weeks, buddy.
Yeah, basically irrelevant because Nick Saban he's just that good.
Yeah, the 24 years between Bear Bryant and Nick Saban, Alabama was nothing. And I think I don't think they're headed quite back that far because I do agree with you. Kalen DeBoer is a really good coach, but he's already made some very poor moves. For one, we've benefited from Sam Petito coming up here. That's a huge gain on our part that he just let walk out the door for his guy at Washington who was helping him bring in 40th ranked classes. Ridiculous move. And he's made a couple of them. But Kirk, when we talk about those kids not being hunters and not talking a lot and being scared to talk, no, they weren't like you, and there weren't many like you at that age. You were incredibly entertaining throughout your career, and a beast on the field, a monster. You were nasty. You were fun to watch. You were a guy that stood out as an offensive lineman, which is rare. And I can't thank you enough for joining me on the show today. It's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate it, buddy. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. You do a fantastic job, and it was an honor for you to ask me to come on. So appreciate you, my man. Again, you did great work today.
Thank you so much, buddy. We'll talk soon. So that'll conclude this edition of Kirk Barton on Juck on Bucks. And wow, that was fantastic. I'm going to tell you what, guys. I was hoping that I would get some good stories out of Kirk, and he did not disappoint. The dude is so impressive. He has an unbelievable memory, and he can tell a story like nobody's business. And I've got 75 more questions that I could have peppered him with, and maybe there will be a second edition someday because Kirk likes to talk, and I like to listen. So that was fantastic. Thank you so much for watching. Kirk, thank you so much. You were awesome, buddy. I really appreciate you. And a very special thanks to my man, Sean, for helping set this up. Doreen, Chuck, Mello, Coconut Dreams, Ohio 7715, Tora, Donald, and Karen Rossback, Bullet Train, all the fam. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon. Juck on Bucks out.